Get ready to remove the filter from your timeline. Get ready to break the censorship of social media. Get ready to support the grassroots alternative to establishment propaganda. Get ready for an authentic voice. Get ready to resist cancel culture. Get ready for free speech media. This is FSM.
From the heart of Trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
As the left becomes less religious, they become more statist. And as the right becomes more religious, they still become more statist.
Whenever you add government, you by default remove community.
But it actually starts with Bush, right? Like in 2006.
That'd be the most satisfying, like, chair shot, ka-chung.
And I have no intention of keeping any promise that I make.
The radical messaging is almost more pragmatic sometimes.
It's bad that the state is as big as it is.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching The Naturalist Capitalist. I'm your host, Reed Coverdale, and we got a special guest today. It is his third time on the show. He was the Libertarian nominee for vice president. Spike Cohen. How you doing, Spike?
I'm doing great, Reed. Thanks for having me on again, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming back on. I get criticized for having a certain group of people on, but they're just honestly the ones who like to come on all the time. So thank you for joining me. Appreciate it.
I'm going to invite on who will come on the show. No, listen, I'm happy to come on. I'm sorry you're getting flack for it, but I'm happy to come on and talk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you on. So I was looking, I had you on in January last, and you have been pretty busy since then. You've been going to all sorts of conventions. You've been on Fox News a lot. You've been doing a lot within the party. So just kind of give us the lowdown on what you've been doing the last few months.
Yeah, man. Last time I was on was just the beginning of the year. Since then, I've been on national TV, including Kennedy, like, I don't know,
50 times.
We used to keep tracks like the sixth time, and now it's I don't know. It's about every week now. So probably about 30 some odd times. I've been to multiple states. I have been to about a dozen states. I've been doing the libertarian conventions. I've also been doing our own outreach events that we're doing with local and state libertarian affiliates, like the one we did in Tennessee to help with outreach with the homeless and in communities throughout Eastern Tennessee. We have been working with other groups to build coalitions for things like, for example, ending qualified immunity, like libertarians in Ohio are doing with a group that they worked with others to create called Accountability Now Ohio. And they had me come to speak at their press conference and speak on their behalf and help encourage people to get involved in that cause. If you're in Ohio, you want to help end qualified immunity, accountabilitynowOhio.com. We're doing all sorts of big stuff, man. It's when I was running for vice president, it was always with the idea that, first of all, I wasn't going anywhere. I know we're used to our candidates running for office and then just sort of going away. But my thing was that was just the beginning of the beginning. The whole purpose of that was to get enough attention from media to be able to deflect that attention into the liberty movement, take that attention and use it to spread the message of liberty to whatever extent that I can. So I have been pretty much every weekend somewhere else, a different state. There have been this coming weekend, the Memorial Day weekend is the, I think, fourth weekend this year that I haven't traveled somewhere else to do something. So they're definitely keeping me busy.
Yeah, for sure. So are you feeling optimistic about how things are going? I am, because things are so bad. That's why I'm feeling good. I honestly, 2020, I thought it was going to be a great year for us across the board.
Yeah.
But after I thought about it more, it really makes sense that it wasn't, and not just with you and Joe, but with everybody. I mean, it was a, it just didn't go well. And I realized it's because it was just a different deal than 2016, and people still really believed in their side. Like the Trump supporters really did believe in Trump, and the Republicans and the Democrats really did believe in Joe Biden and the Democrats. I'm seeing that crack now on both sides. I've seen Democrats who are really upset that Joe Biden bombed Syria and that he has like unflinching support for Israel. You go through the comments on Twitter and you can just see it all the way down. Like, I voted for you, I campaigned for you, I gave you money, and you're doing this. It's like, I don't really know what you expected. And then the Republicans, obviously, they've had, a lot of them have just had it with the party. They realize that they've given up on any sense of small government or responsible spending or gun rights or anything. So I'm actually a little optimistic, but do you feel that you go a lot more places than I do? You actually talk to real people on the ground. So is that something you're seeing and feeling as well?
I am optimistic, and here's why. In every metric that we use to judge if the liberty movement is growing, it is. We are seeing more libertarians on social media, and not just in the party, just in general. We're seeing more of them on social media. We're seeing more of them get play in major media, including me and others. We are seeing a growth in Libertarian Party membership, a nearly 50% growth in the last year. We are seeing double-digit growth of registered libertarians across the country. We are seeing Joe and I got the second highest number of votes the Libertarian Party has ever gotten. More importantly, the highest number of votes that the Libertarian Party has ever gotten during a presidential re-election cycle, where people are focused on either keeping the incumbent in office or getting rid of them. 2016, 2008, these are times when it was easier at times or 2000 time. These were times when it was easier in 2016, easier for someone who was a third party candidate to get more attention, because instead of talking about, are we going to replace George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump with are we going to replace them or keep them? They're talking about who's going to be the next president. And it changes things quite a bit. We also have the highest number of elected libertarians in, I think, 2 generations. Pretty much we're closing on the all-time high. So all of those things lead to good. I hate to burst your bubble a little bit, but what we're, in terms of the reason you're optimistic, this is actually very common post-election. Everyone feels comfortable right now saying what they have to say because they don't feel like it's going to hurt their side. At the same time, everyone who's coming off the high of I won, or coming off the low of wow, I lost, they're looking at their side and going, oh God, you suck. What did I just vote for? Right? The people that lost, it's real easy. They're able to look and go, gosh, you completely failed us. You weren't even doing that great of a job. We voted for you to stop them. You're a scam, and that this is not what I ever wanted or voted for. And then the side that wins looks and goes, the fuck? Why did I vote for you? You're doing the same thing they did. Oh, you're going to end the caging of children? No, it looks like you're ramping it up. Or you're going to end our expansionary foreign policy and our disastrous imperial war policy? No, it looks like you're expanding that. You said you're going to, and people on the left, oh, you're going to, make it so that we can afford to live and afford healthcare. It looks like all that's getting worse too. So this is the prime time for libertarians to strike, to say, hey guys, remember the ones who said that we had the solutions, and this is a prime time to do that. But I will say, unfortunately, this is very common. We'll start to see the meandering back to the talking points come the midterms, and then a real meandering back to the talking points come 2024. But we can still get people. We can still get those people who already gave up on voting Republican and Democrat. We can get a lot of those people who are voting lesser evil, who look at our ideas and recognize that they make the most sense, but they keep, going out, voting for who they think is the lesser evil. We can also, there's a lot of, even before or as we are trying to reach out to everyone, including the normies, there's a lot of libertarians that haven't joined the Libertarian Party. Libertarian Party membership only makes up just a few percentage of the overall liberty movement. So there's a lot of people that already completely or almost completely agree with our ideas, and we can reach out to them with a combination of things. Number one, we have to show them that we are strong and grounded in our beliefs. But here's a big thing too that often gets overlooked. It's not just the messaging, man. Why are they voting? What is the first thing they say when they tell you why they're voting Republican or Democrat or whatever?
Because they don't think we can win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So refocus on where we can win. We're winning city and county-wide races. Right. We're winning state legislative races. We're positioned to be able to win some statewide races. We came really close with Ricky Harrington. We're in a position to be able to contest some of these congressional races. We can do it, but we have to focus where we can win. We can't constantly focus on our heroes being people that we know cannot win, because what happens is that L starts to stand for loser. So we have to change that by focusing on where we can win. And yes, staying true to the message, finding ways to connect with everyday people with that message. But we also have to bring them back with, hey, look, and I say this all the time. I go on these, Zoom calls with people from YAL and, Liberty Republicans and things like that. I meet them in person and, other people that, they like the Libertarian Party, but they think they have to vote for the lesser evil. And I tell them the same thing every single time. I'm not going to, how I think about lesser evils. It's a sham. It's a good cop, bad cop routine. But you know what? I'm not even going to argue with you over that. If you believe that this party and this movement best represents what you believe and what you want to see for the future, then come and join us and help us grow to the point where you don't have to choose between your principles and electability and the solutions you want and lesser evil. Instead, come and help us grow so we can grow past that. In the meantime, if you and vote for us in the races you think we can win. In the meantime, if you still feel like you need to vote Republican or Democrat or whatever for the lesser evil, I won't even know how you vote unless you tell me. It's a secret ballot. I'm not going to give you a hard time. I'm not going to vote shame you. Vote how you feel like you need to vote, but come and join us and come and grow this party into something that eventually you won't feel like you need to have to do that. So I'm very optimistic.
Yeah, so I know you identify as an anarchist, and I am a new anarchist. I finally admitted to myself and everybody, and I think it was February. I finally was like, yeah,
Well, welcome.
I mean,
welcome to the fold. Yeah,
it's just the inevitable, honest conclusion you're going to arrive at once you go down this rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, I definitely used to think in the way of we're going to get someone in the White House and they're going to start tearing this down. From the top down. And, to you, obviously, and to people who have been in this game long enough, it's just obviously not going to happen. It seems like going after state houses and maybe Congress, but mostly just like state houses and governorships where we can actually make change and resist what the federal government is doing. It seems like that's where we should be going. And a lot of Republicans, I think where we can reach them is they've actually given up on the federal government. A lot of them believe the election was stolen, whether or not it was.
Right.
They don't think voting for president makes a difference anymore. They don't think voting for Congress does. So a lot of them, we might be able to say, hey, you can make a difference on your statewide elections. You still have control there. And then it seems like running for president is more of an advertisement for everything else we're doing, but the states are where we should really be trying to win. Is that kind of what you think, or what would you say?
States, cities, counties, states and below is our prime proving grounds right now. We are winning races there. We already have the means and the resources and the wherewithal to do so. And if we focused more of our energy and our money and our resources on those races, then we could win even more. I think that if we play our cards right, we could get hundreds, even 1,000 libertarians elected in citywide, countywide, and state legislative races by the 2022 midterms. I believe that we can do that. Now, it requires a change in our internal culture instead of focusing so much. And by the way, I am greatly appreciate the support that I get from folks when they're saying, hey, are you going to run for president, or are you going to, team up with Dave Smith or Justin Amash or whoever, Vermin Supreme, whoever, and run as their vice president, or they run as your vice president, whatever. I appreciate the support and I understand that. But my standard answer is I don't know what I'm doing for 2024. I also don't really care. And here's why. Until we can reliably win city and county and state legislative races as a matter of just that happens. We don't even have to focus too much on it. We have candidates that run for those things and win those reliably. There's not a shot in hell that we're going to do much more than get attention for the liberty movement. Now, I'm not ruling it out. It doesn't even necessarily mean that that isn't a useful thing. It is a useful thing. First of all, we need to do it just for ballot access reasons. In many states, you have to run a presidential candidate. Number two, you can leverage it if you put the right people in there for president, vice president, to actually get attention and to actually get our ideas looked at and get our solutions looked at. But I want to focus much more on races we can win. As you said, statewide races, if we get enough state legislators, if we get enough people lobbying state legislators, we can get a lot accomplished. Reed, in Tennessee, there's a group called For All Tennessee, and they have existed for the better part of 4 months. They were actually partially inspired by a speech I gave after the election, during the election, talking about how the things that you can do in your communities. And they had a budget of a couple $1,000s. They have a membership that's measured in the dozens, and they were able to pass a ban on no-knock raids. They were able to almost pass. They actually did pass it, but it was illegally ruled that it was voted down, even though the votes were clear that it was voted up. Ballot access reforms. They were also able to pass a duty to intervene, that police officers are now legally required to intervene when they see another officer breaking the law. And there was one other thing that they passed. I'm forgetting. Anyway, they were able to pass. It's two people on the hill there talking with legislators, and they were able to get some amazing things passed in a very quick period of time. We can all be doing that in our cities and in our counties. And if they don't listen to us, then we run against them, and then we can win because we've shown the community that we have the best ideas. So no, I do think that needs to be our focus moving forward. And from there, eventually, the bigger races, the senatorial races, the gubernatorial races, the bigger, more hard-fought congressional races and things like that, and eventually the White House, we can win those, but we have to do this first. So that's where my focus is.
Yeah, so obviously at the state level, you can change the laws within your state.
Yep.
But you can also affect the federal government. Something great that's really being pushed around the country right now is the Defend the Guard legislation state by state. What other things do you think we can really do to starve the beast? I've floated the idea, and I don't know how tenable it is, but of income tax sanctuary states, something like that, where you're really putting the screws to the federal government. But have you heard of anything aside from the Defend the Guard legislation that can really defy the federal government and get them to start paying attention?
The Defend the Guard and all of the sanctuary state stuff. I support all of that stuff. If you have, those are probably the two biggest things. The other things are simply refusing to participate in what the federal government's doing. So getting your state out of the civil asset forfeiture program that's run at the top by the U.S. Department of Justice, getting your state out of decriminalizing drugs. When you decriminalize drugs, you're actually breaking federal law by not participating in their schedule. Good. We've already called their bluff when it comes to weed, right? They have now said that they have zero priority for enforcing federal law when it comes to marijuana in states that have decriminalized or made it legalized marijuana. We can do that with everything. Here's something for folks to remember. Government power is illusory. There is no such thing as government power. If government power was a real thing, none of us would speed. The reality is what really exists is what we are willing to accept. That's why I say you are the power, because you working with others, decide what you're willing to accept. When we get people into citywide races, citywide offices, countywide offices, state legislative offices, and they make these changes, we can send a giant middle finger to the federal government. With these sanctuary states, with all of these things, they're technically illegal. Defend the Guard, I don't believe, is technically illegal, but the sanctuary states are. It's violating federal law. Good. Create so many pressure points that they simply cannot hope to enforce against it, and eventually their power crumbles even before we can get into Congress or into the Senate. And then we'll work our way there eventually too.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Liberty Unity, and then I want to get into some current events. But I was the Liberty Uniter for a couple months, and Honestly, I'm the naturalist capitalist. I have my own message that I want to talk about. The liberty unity thing should be a self-evident, obvious thing because we're libertarians. We agree on, I don't know, 95% of the issues most of the time. You know, there might be some differences on like abortion or immigration sometimes, but outside of that, pretty much all libertarians agree on almost everything. And we fight each other like cats and dogs. And so I've really been pushing this unity thing. And Dave Smith has really pushed it too. And a lot of people are making the accusation that I'm just trying to unite the Mises caucus. And I've said, look, liberty unity is for all libertarians. And I know you and Justin Amash and Dave just did a clubhouse meeting last night. I was in it for like 10 minutes, but I didn't have much time. But how did that go? What do you think about liberty unity in general? I'm not sure how familiar you are with it. Do you agree that it's sort of a self-evident, obvious thing that libertarians should just kind of put the petty stuff aside and focus on the big issues?
Absolutely. First of all, the accusation that you're trying to unite the Mises is united. Right libertarians are increasingly united. And you know the so-called Ron Paul revolution wing of libertarianism is as united as it has ever been. Mission accomplished. So the accusation that that's what you're trying to do, that's already long. That horse is long since out of the stable. Liberty unity, I think, is self-evident. It's something that I've been pushing back when I was running for the Libertarian nomination for vice president. For those who don't know, I received the endorsement of the Mises caucus. I received the endorsement of the Radical Caucus. I received the endorsement from prominent members of the Pragmatic Caucus and of the Audacious Caucus before that thing fell apart. We have... This was not by my trying to go and lobby heavily to these different caucuses to endorse me or anything like that. I was just consistent. I would talk to them, but I was consistent in my message. I was consistent in presenting libertarianism in a way that connected every bit as much with Mises people as it did with radical people, as it did with audacious people, as it did with pragmatic people, and for that matter, as it did with people that aren't even in the liberty movement to begin with, just normal everyday people who haven't even heard our ideas. When you present our ideas in a way that unites people instead of finds ways to divide us, we can really get somewhere. So I believe it very strongly. Now, I will say this. The reason that we don't have unity is because I believe that there are some people on both sides or on multiple sides, because it's not really just two sides, on multiple sides who don't want unity. They want their side to win. Okay, they want their side to win. And if it involves the other side's losing, and even of there being a what they would consider a hiccup, and what I'd consider, and I think you would consider to be a loss for the liberty movement short term, they're perfectly fine with that. I've heard people on both sides say that they would rather membership go down as a result of the other side leaving, turning tail and leaving the party, than to see it go up as a result of unity. So there are people who don't want it to unify. And so anyone that is out there that is pushing to alienate entire sections of the liberty movement, I think we should ignore them. I think that we should ignore them in favor of the people who, and this is not to say unity does not mean I have to agree with everything.
Exactly.
Okay? Unity does not mean
Thank you.
that I have to, there's people in, I'm a member of the Mises caucus. Okay. I'm also a member of the Prague caucus and of the Radical caucus. If there are people in the Mises caucus I just flat out disagree with, especially on certain like cultural things. I consider myself fairly traditional and conservative, but not as much as others. And there are things I disagree with them on. There are certainly things I disagree with Prags on, especially when it comes to policy. They tend to, not always, but tend to be more on the moderate side, whereas I'm a freaking ANCAP, right? So now with that said, there are like radical Prags as well, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are more, moderate than I am. We all recognize that we are speeding along in the wrong direction right now in terms of this government growing in size, scope, power over our lives, cost, the amount of debt it's running up, and in the human toll of suffering that it's taking out on us and everyone around us. And we all recognize we need to turn it around and go very fast in the other direction to undo as much of that harm and reduce as much of that harm as possible. Once we start heading there, we can all argue over what exit we want to get off at, right? The Prags will say, well, once we're back at a more constitutional limited government, that's fine. And some radicals will say, or some people will say, well, once we're off at, radical minarchism, then we'll let off. And you and me, we wanted to hit the guardrails, and then we'll go and run into the ocean like that. That's that. But we can figure that out when we get there. And even then we don't have to fight. We can just welcome people off as we're, working to dismantle as we put it, the omnipotent state. So I believe unity is crucial. I believe that, and I say this all the time at the conventions I go to, I do this little invocation thing right before business starts. I do like a little pep rally, and I go, who's here? Who's ready to set whatever state we're in free? And they cheer, and I go, who's ready to end the wars? And they cheer. And who's ready to end the Fed? And they cheer. And I'll say, who's ready to end the war on drugs? Or who's ready to end some local or, statewide thing that they hate or whatever, Gavin Newsom's lockdown orders or whatever it is in that state. And they'll cheer. And I'll say, now who here didn't cheer for any of that? Silence. Every time I've done this probably close to a dozen, actually over a dozen times, including the Zoom chats that I've done to conventions. Every time, silence. And I say that silence that you hear is the sound of you not having a single enemy in this room.
Right.
And if you went up right now to whoever you consider to be your ideological or factional opponent in this room, and you sat down and I handed you, let's say 5 or 10, main issues and asked you what your positions were on it, you would probably find that you agree 85, 95, maybe even 100% on the time on those things. Where you disagree on is on strategy, messaging, maybe some policy stuff, maybe some cultural stuff that really has nothing to do with government. Once you get government out of it, it's live however you want to. Maybe over whether you like a specific person or not, a myriad of different things that have absolutely nothing to do with the liberty movement and whether or not we should be free. And you both recognize that we should be free. Agree or disagree all you want. Debate all you want. I've long since ago learned not to tell libertarians not to argue with each other because it'll do it even harder, right? We are a rambunctious bunch. But just remember, these are not your enemies. These are your allies against a Leviathan that robs us blind, that throws us in cages, that sends us off to war, that often murders us and abuses us and mistreats our children and our families and loved ones. We must defeat it, and the only way to defeat it is to come together as much as we can.
I can't agree more with any of that. That was absolutely exactly what I've been saying, exactly what Dave's been saying, and exactly what you've been saying. I think it's also what Justin Amash has been saying in his own way.
To a large extent, yes.
Yeah. He's not quite as, on the attack as we are. He's a little more mellow, but he's saying
that's him.
Things.
That's Justin. Justin isn't typically on the attack in general, but
right.
He's saying the same thing. Yes,
exactly. And I actually think there are some people who don't even necessarily want their side to win. They don't want to become irrelevant, and they don't like seeing people like you come in and be successful, people like me to the extent of success that I've had. They don't like seeing Dave do well. Mm-hmm. Like they just want to maintain their dynasty that they've had in the Libertarian Party for however long. And what I tell them is, I'm doing my own thing. Spike's doing his thing. Dave's doing his thing. Justin's doing his thing. Yep. We're all doing our own thing. Go do your own thing. Don't devote all your time to tearing down what somebody else is doing. If you don't like what that other person is doing and you want it to go in a different direction, then insert your messaging and try to push things in that direction.
People get mad at me. I was on a thing and they were talking about, I forget what I was on, and they were talking about Mises. Mm-hmm. And we sort of came to a detente where we just agreed to disagree on some things. And I said, listen, if you want to beat Mises, bring more people to the meetings, get your organizational stuff together, bring more people, excite more people to your version of how liberty should move forward. You might peel away some Mises people. Who knows? You might get there and the Mises people hear your message and go, wow, that sounds at least as good as what we have, maybe even better. Come shine past. If you have someone that you want to beat, shine past them. This thing of constantly beating up, and I got ridiculed by some people for this. Oh, I shouldn't have to beat, phobic people and whatever. Okay, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, you do. That's the reality of everything. We shouldn't have to beat the Leviathan superstate. We do. It is what it is. So whatever you think of these people, if you want to beat them, you have to beat them. And what I would strongly encourage all of us, Mises people, radical people, audacious people, whatever, anyone in the liberty movement, inside or outside the party, look at the actual people and what they are saying, not the abstraction of them or the caricature of them, not what the people that you agree with are saying about them. Look at them and listen to what they're saying. And you're probably going to find a mix of things that you agree with and disagree with. And I bet you, if you're honest with yourself, you're going to find far more that you agree with than disagree with. And maybe you should join them. Right? Doesn't necessarily mean you got to sign off on everything that they agree. I'm with Mises. I'm with the Prags. I'm with Radical, and I'm constantly saying things that I tend not to do it too publicly because I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus or trying to be hypercritical. But I've certainly made it clear some of the things that I don't necessarily agree with from all those different factions. But the reality is, all of them are trying to set people free. Who the hell am I to tell these small fish in a small pond, both of which need to grow, that, well, I'm not going to work with you because I disagree with you about, how radical we should be in our messaging, or I disagree with you because I really like this plank in the platform and I don't think we should be deleting it. Like, who cares? Like, in the scale of things, it doesn't matter. Let's go win people for liberty.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I swear I'm going to eventually just move past talking about unity because it should be obvious to everyone. And if they don't get on board, they should just be ignored and become irrelevant, because I think that most of the people who are just there to tear down, they don't really have an audience. No one really follows them. No one really cares about them. If you're actually out there trying to do something, you're the one who people are paying attention to. But I want to get into some current events. I want to talk about guns. So I care a lot about guns. I have for a while. But I've never really thought that they're going to go after them. And here's why. Because we were locked down for almost an entire, a lot of states were locked down for an entire year. They lost their jobs. There was tyranny in all sorts of different forms. And we have 500 million guns in this country. And nothing happened. Like that insurrection, there were a couple handguns that showed up. There was no serious.
That was not an insurrection. It was not an insurrection.
There was no serious armed uprising anywhere. There was a protest in Michigan where people showed up with rifles, but they didn't do anything.
It was not.
And I feel like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but it just seems like the Democrats are always going to talk about guns the same way the Republicans always talk about abortion. And they're going to touch it around the edges, but I don't really feel like they're ever actually going to do anything. Because if they ever actually tried to take guns away, it would be such a massive undertaking. It would be sticking a stick into a hornet's nest. And they already know they don't have to, because we have the guns and we don't do anything. So there was just a shooting in California yesterday. And they're looking at making the head of the ATF, David Chipman, who's a scoundrel, a disgusting human being,
murderer, yeah,
who's head of I think he has a high position in Giffords. So everyone's really nervous about what's going to happen with guns. I'm still skeptical. So I was just wondering what you think. Or do you think they're actually going to come for the guns, or are they stupid enough to do? I mean, they have been stupid lately, like with the vaccine passports, they were pushing that hard, and they weren't smart about that. They went too far.
They went too far. You see what happened there? You see what happened there? Government power is illusory. If government power was a real thing, we would have vaccine passports right now. You had soccer moms show up and say, no, the hell, you're not doing that. Exactly. And that ended that. By the way, you're seeing soccer moms ending this whole mask mandate and school garbage. They're having their kids come home with crap all over the, snot and everything all over the mask, or they come home with some other friend's mask because they're trading them because they got cartoon characters or whatever on them. They're saying this is stupid. A 5, 7, 10-year-old can't keep a mask on all day long, and if they can, they're certainly not being hygienic about it. So there's nothing. I mean, a mask can theoretically work if you're being smart and hygienic about it, right? Like you don't see surgeons sitting there, wiping their nose off on it or whatever. Like that's not how masks work, and they can actually make things dirtier if you're using it the wrong way. Because now you got something covered in crap right up on your face like that. Like this can actually make things worse, right? And so soccer moms are killing the mask mandates left and right, especially in the schools.
They kind of do run the country, if you think about it. It's kind of scary. Like it's a little...
Soccer moms and old people run this planet. The second you can convince, that's why I tell people, I'm like, listen, I want my message to resonate with soccer moms, the most normified normies in all of normie land, because once we have them on our side, once we have soccer moms out there saying, yeah, I don't think it's right that government's doing XYZ, that puts an end to all that shit, because government power is not a real thing. Government power is that thing that they threaten us with. The reality is the very second that even what they say, the 3%, that 3, 5, maybe 10% of people simply go, no, I'm not going to listen to that. They don't have the numbers to effectively enforce it. And the other 90% of people look and they go, oh, we don't have to do that either. All right, great. We're not going to do it either. And then it's over. Yeah. It's over. So, I am a strong believer that this can change very, very quickly. So back to your question about guns. No, I don't think they're going to do anything serious. I think we might get a return to the assault weapons ban. Maybe we might get a return to, they're probably going to do some stuff on ammunition. They're going to drive up the cost. They're going to make it so only wealthy people can get everything that they want. I think the bigger thing that statists, and this is Republicans too, I think the biggest thing statists are trying to do is change the culture to seeing civilian gun ownership as this weird, bad thing that only racists and murderers and bad people want. And then somehow they're going to have to try to figure out how to thread the needle of saying, but government should absolutely have guns. So they're really having to work hard to frame, which is why I lean into, like, when I want to do gun rights stuff, the first people I'm reaching out to are people like Maj Touré and the Black Panthers and some Hispanic gun rights groups. Like, I want to reach out to and queer gun rights groups, and yes, also gun rights groups with white people and men and whatever else. Like, it's not to say that it only has to be, people of color and minority groups and LGBT groups. But I like to put them front and center to be like, no. Gun rights is about people protecting themselves. And the more marginalized you are or perceive yourself to be in this society, the more you need guns. The biggest, most powerful women's rights tool is a woman's ability to be able to defend herself against a man without any help. How do you do that? With a gun. Yeah. So I lean very much into that. I think there might be some moderate changes and some stuff will come, some stuff will go away. Remember, Barack Obama talked shit about guns for 8 years, and we actually saw a net reduction in federal gun regulations during his time. Donald Trump came in talking tough about, I'm the NRA and I like the right to keep the bear arms. Then he turned around and said, take the guns first, due process later, cheer-led for red flag laws, introduced some not huge regulations, but just the fact that any at all, when he talked all that crap about how great he was about guns, I don't think we're going to see a major change. We're just going to see the constant drumbeat of private gun ownership equals murder, because they're trying to disarm us in here. Like you said, we already have the guns. We aren't doing anything with it. It's far more important that we look at authority and go, oh, I don't want to mess with that. That's why they say stuff like the Second Amendment. I just retweeted some schmuck who wrote that the Second Amendment won't defend you against government.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Bet. All right. But they're it's more important that you think that than that they take your gun. Because then you can have that gun. You're not going to actually use it to defend yourself against tyranny, right? That's why they push. What do they push? They push obedience to a caring government on the left. And then on the right, they push the thin blue line. Our proud boys and girls in blue that are keeping us safe from the barbarians who want to take everything from. In both ways, they're telling you, respect authority for the sake of authority and leave it to them and don't resist. So, it's up to us to be like, no, resist everything.
Yeah, that's actually where I fear for gun rights, and it's not just gun rights. It's red flag laws. That's where I feel Republicans don't really oppose those. At least elected Republicans. I feel like the base does, but
the base does. Yeah,
but the base loves the police and wants to give them all the tools they need. Yep. And then they don't connect the dots. So that means red flag laws sometimes. So,
how many FUDs have we all talked to on social media going, oh, I believe in the Second Amendment just as much as the next red-blooded American, but I think these crazy people and people saying stuff they shouldn't be saying, I think our police should be able to stop them before they get out there and start shooting at cops. And it's like, well, but that's the resistance to tyranny that you said you supported on your bumper sticker. But the red flag, and a lot of them don't realize what a red flag law is. Red flag law is swatting. Mm-hmm. It is calling the police and saying, this person said or did something very dangerous. Please take their guns away. And they go and they get this warrant, which is, there's no real process there. They literally go and say, this has been reported. And the judge goes, all right. And then they go
and the
and
judge isn't going to want to refuse it, because what if he doesn't sign the red flag order and then something happens? So he's pretty much always going to sign it. Yeah.
Exactly. Risk avoidance leads to tyranny for that very reason. Judges, cops, they go, oh man, if I let this one go, they could be the murderer. They could be the whatever. And so even if they're not necessarily bad people, they're more like people
they don't like hillbillies fight. Sorry.
I'm sorry. It's actually the FUD you don't like. I was just channeling the FUD. But no,
he's channeling his old inner FUD that he's left behind.
I'm channeling my old inner FUD that I hear in Horry County, South Carolina, all the time with their freaking NRA sticker. But no, a lot of times it's not necessarily that they're bad people. They're just like, what if I am the only one with the power to stop this? And then I, like you said, this is the one that ends up going and killing a bunch of people or whatever. So, we got to get rid of these powers. The concept of red flag laws violates multiple constitutionally enshrined rights, for whatever that's worth. But more importantly, it takes away our right to keep and bear arms in any real substantive way. It takes away our right to free speech, because now we could say something that triggers someone else, and now here come the cops to take our guns at 3 a.m. It takes away our right to due process in any real substantive way. It takes away our right to security and safety in our own homes. It's red flag laws coupled with no knock raids is swatting. Like, it's just straight up. They're coming and they're taking your guns. You don't even have an opportunity to see what's happening. And yeah, people die as a result of that. So that definitely has to go. And, it's great that the Republican base agrees with us on that. The same way it's great that a good bit of the Democrat base agrees with us on things like drug policy or criminal justice reform or qualified immunity. That's great. We can't rely on them to agree with us on everything. And their preferred elected officials just suck on it. At best, they'll pander to it, and then they'll get into office and do whatever the hell the elites that put them there tell them to.
Yeah, exactly. So we touched on it a little bit there with the masks, but I wanted to talk about COVID restrictions being lifted. And I do think that they went too far, too hard. They were dumb. Like, they were going to give you a Krispy Kreme donut if you got your vaccine, and then they were going to push for vaccines passports. It wasn't played very well. No. There was no incentive to get the vaccine because you still had to wear a mask. And then they figured that out after like a month, and were like, oh, actually, okay, you don't have to wear a mask if you get a vaccine. And the Libertarian Party actually just tweeted out the other day that COVID was a test run or something like that.
The lockdowns were a trial run.
That's what it was,
like that.
And there was a CNN article that came out a few months ago that said that exact thing, that it was a climate change test run, for lowering carbon emissions. So, I mean, that's not much of a conspiracy if CNN is straight up admitting it. But I was wondering, what do you think with how we reacted to the lockdowns, how we just kind of took it? And I'll admit, I mean, at first I was, and just like you, I was never supportive of mandatory lockdowns or bailouts or any of that. I didn't know how bad the disease was when it started, so I was nervous, and I did wear a mask everywhere, and I was very careful around older people because we didn't know. But I mean, now we kind of do know, and it looks like a lot of people knew a lot of stuff before they were telling us. And so, do you think it was sort of a test run? And what do you think it says about the American people that we fell for it that easily? Do you think they would again, now that this has happened and now that they see how ridiculous it was?
Oh, they'll absolutely do it again. So the test run, and this may just be my interpretation, it makes it sound like it's this sort of like, one-off plan thing. This is what government always does.
Right.
When
it
a
doesn't need to be a
crisis
goal.
happens,
They're always going to try to do that.
This is what they always do. So if you want to call this a test run, sure, it was a test run. But it's not a test when they keep doing it. It's policy at this point. Here is the way that government deals with a crisis. Like, for example, a virus. They make it worse. So you had them say they weren't allowing testing for COVID for the first couple months that it was here, which allowed it to spread largely undetected, out of control. And then when it did start popping up, you had state governments across the country and recommended from federal recommendations on by health services shoving those COVID patients in nursing homes and mental health facilities. The place where the people who get it are the most likely to die from it. That's why we went from going, I don't know if it's here yet, to, oh my God, thousands of people have it and hundreds are dying and the fatality rate is 10% and all this shit, right? Then as a result of the panic they've created, they use that as an excuse for more power. Oh, we don't know what this virus, just how serious it is, but it looks like it's airborne, and it looks like everyone's going to get it if we don't all just stay inside forever, unless you have to go to Costco all at the same time, all together at the exact same damn time. But then go right back home. Like cold and flu season, where you only go outside to do the things you absolutely have to do, and then you go back and stay inside with your family, which is how cold and flu spreads even more easily during that time of year because of those conditions. So we're going to create the conditions for cold and flu. Then we're going to be shocked when it continues to spread. And then we're going to use that as an excuse to push even more draconian orders and legislation. This is the pattern. Make the crisis worse. Leverage that panic from the crisis being worse for more control. It fails or makes things worse. Leverage that for more control. It fails or makes things worse. Leverage that for more control. Test run. This is what government does. It sucks at everything it does. It is that perfect mixture of inept and conniving. That it's, well, we're idiots and we screw up everything we do by the very nature of how government is formed. It's not just that the wrong people are in there. This is what government is. It is an extortive monopoly that tries to solve society's woes and is unable to do so. And then the only thing it knows how to do is exploit fear for more control. So that's the one thing it does effectively, is exploit fear for more control. Whenever it tries to actually do anything, it makes things worse, which creates more fear, which they then exploit for more control. So is this going to happen again? Of course it's going to happen again. It's going to continue happening and this isn't just until we libertarians get into the White House. It's until libertarianism is the culture. The predominant culture is people who look at this shit and go, yeah, you guys suck. You've made this worse. Every single thing you've done has made things worse, or at the very least not helped. You're leveraging this as a reason to rob us and hand off trillions of dollars of universal basic income for billionaires to the cronies who put you in office. The rest of us, you hand a few $100 of our own money at a time and give us a debt bill for 10, 20 times that much with interest. You aren't allowing us to work. You aren't allowing us to get cancer screenings and treatments. You aren't allowing us to get outpatient procedures that we need. You aren't allowing us to go to rehab, even though you kept the liquor stores open. You aren't allowing us to live our lives. You aren't allowing us to go to church. And it's because you fucked up. So that's the culture that we need to change American culture to. We need to make the cultural change that will go downstream and work its way to the political changes that we want to see. When we do that, then all of this changes. Because again, government power doesn't exist. You are the power. You working with other people decide what you are willing to tolerate. And if enough of us come together, then we can fix all of this by simply changing the culture and then kicking these idiots out of office and making sure it never happens again. Dismantling the systems that they built and taking all of that power and freedom and money that's been robbed from all of us and putting it back in the people's hands where it always damn well belonged.
Couldn't agree more. The last thing I want to ask you about is the conflict going on between Israel and Gaza right now. And I've been pretty outspoken about it, and I've been called a Jew hater and anti-Semitic and everything for being critical of our policy with Israel. Because to me, it's not just a conflict between two countries. It's one country that we give an excessive amount of money to every year. They have a very powerful influence over our politicians through AIPAC with foreign policy, with funding. And we're basically funding their own private war on terror by giving enough aid to Hamas to keep them going, because they want Hamas to be able to fight them so that they can continue to have a positive image around the world. Because if Hamas doesn't exist, then they look like they're being jerks to the Palestinians. But I wanted to get your opinion. What do you think about what's going on over there?
Well, I am Jewish, and so you have been atoned of any accusations of anti-Semitism. Here's the thing. I bestow upon you the good goy award.
Right, that's great.
No. Listen. Here's the thing. First of all, everything you said is pretty much correct, but it fast forwards about 100 years from where we should be starting our conversation, which is in the 1860s and 70s, when the original Zionists started going back to Israel. The original Zionists, or the new Yeshuv, which was a contrast to the old Yeshuv, which was the Jews who never left Palestine, as it was called at the time, the Holy Land, Israel, whatever you want to call it. The new Yeshuv were people who decided to just go to Israel. They were Jews. They were facing all sorts of oppression and discrimination and sometimes genocides across Europe and across Eastern Europe and parts of Central Asia, and even as far as Yemen. And they said, we're going to just go back to Israel. We're going to find pieces of land. We're going to buy those pieces of land. We're going to make relationships with the Jews that are already there, the old Yishuv. We're going to make relationships with the Arabs and the Bedouins who are there. We're going to live in as much peace and harmony as we can. And for the most part, up until pretty much the post-World War I era, that worked fairly well. There were a couple little minor skirmishes and stuff. Nothing really major. There weren't. I'm not even sure there were any real deaths. Like it was disagreements over property line drawings and things like that. But for the most part, they lived in relative peace and harmony, which should not surprise anyone. This narrative that the Jews and the Muslims have been fighting forever. Well, everyone's been fighting forever. But if you look at most history between Jews and Muslims, it is Jews and Muslims living together and fighting against Christians who are trying to invade them. So literally, that was the long-standing, millennia old history of Jews and Muslims, right? So Jews start coming back to Palestine, and they are. This is when it was under Ottoman control, the Turkish control. After World War I ended, and the Allies, the British and the French, seized what they called the Middle East, what's now called the Middle East, which was part of the Ottoman Empire. They started carving it up. And under the Sykes-Picot Agreement, they created the British Mandate of Palestine. Now, what they started doing is dealing with their Jewish problem, because the Goy didn't want the Jews in Europe any more than the Jews wanted to be there. They start moving Jews into Israel, seizing land that's owned by Arabs and pushing Jews onto it. And now they're imposing a foreign governance on them because they're sending foreign Jews, they're sending British and French Jews to go there and administer this thing, right? So now you begin this process of Arabs going, wait a second, whoa. We were fine with Jews coming here, but now you have foreign governments, white governments, sending what look like white people to us to go and administer this new colonialist policy. This is when the bad blood started in this era. Again, we could spend hours talking about how the Muslim Brotherhood was a part of this, how American interests with petroleum were a part of this. But the long story short is, starting with Sykes-Picot and into the British Mandate of Palestine, and moving forward from there, you started seeing a change in policy where now the Jews that were coming there were either choosing to come there as part of these European involvements and seizing of land from Arabs who were the rightful owners of the land, and people that were just being shoved into Palestine who didn't want to leave Europe, but were being forcibly deported to. And that's when it started. And then that goes with the state of Israel. And then you got the U.S. that steps in and recognizes Israel as a counter to the Soviets. Then you have, Iran considers Israel to be the little Satan and the U.S. to be the big Satan because of what the U.S. did in Iran with Operation Ajax and overthrowing their democratically elected government and replacing it with the Shah, who was an absolute brutal tyrant. You see all of it, and the Iran-Iraq war. And what happens is that Israel is not just the actual personification of or the actual implementation of U.S. and Western war policy, colonial policy in the Middle East. It also represents all the other things that have been happening. And then Israel itself figured out, you know what, we could create a lobby where we get billions of dollars a year so long as we promise to turn around and spend it on the U.S. and European military industrial complex. And then that allows us to build this. We can now tax our citizens and build this lavish social safety net, because all of the money that we're spending on this endless perpetual war policy can be basically paid for by the U.S. taxpayer. And then, Hamas. So the PLO was actually was sort of related to the Ba'ath Party, which was Saddam Hussein. But I feel like Scott Horton right now. Saddam Hussein and Bashar al-Assad. They were a secularist, pan-Arabist, kind of socialist group. They were not a religious group by any stretch of the imagination. They were Arab. Many of them were Muslim. They actually supported defending religious minorities. We saw that in Iraq and Syria. There were actually Christians in leadership and even some Jews living in there. But what happened after that is Israel thought, you know what, we need to have a religious fanatic organization that will fight against those dirty apostate Muslims, right? And so that'll work. So then they create Hamas, or foster Hamas. Pretty much,
Right.
Hamas is Israel's Al Qaeda.
Exactly.
They created this group, and now if Hamas is way more effective because instead of being built around this weird concept of pan-Arabism, now it's built around this religious mandate of driving all the Jews into the sea. And let's be very clear: Hamas, Fatah, the PLO, these are brutal governments that are unspeakably cruel to the people that are under their presumed jurisdiction. These are people that put rocket launching pads inside of schools and inside. I mean, these are terrible people as well. There is no good actor in power in this region. But if you look at it, if you go all the way back, because again, I could spend hours talking about this. I often avoid talking about it because you have to really unpack the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
And I don't like giving hot takes on this because inevitably, no matter what I say, I'm going to be both an anti-Semite and a self-hating Jew and a Jewish Zionist defender all at the same time, right? But if you go back to the what originally started this, everything was working fine for the most part when people were respecting each other's private property rights. And the very second governments got involved and started disrespecting people's private property rights, that's when all this shit started. And it's only gotten worse from there. And it's only going to end when we end all of the aid, not just to Israel, but to Egypt, which is another huge player in that region and is also fostering all the bad blood that's happening in there. Stop all of the foreign aid. Foreign aid, like Ron Paul said, is the act of taking money from poor Americans and giving it to rich people in other countries. Stop it. Enough already. It's not working. It's immoral, and it is making things worse. Begin that process, and then from there, when you're no longer subsidizing this war effort, the Jews and the Arabs are going to have to sit down and figure out how to make this work. When they're not being subsidized, when this endless war policy is not being subsidized and encouraged, when we aren't handing off weapons to Saudi Arabia and Al-Qaeda to murder off the Yemeni civilian population, they're going to have to figure out how to work together. And yes, that means some tyrants are going to get toppled. And instead of the CIA having to go in and game the thing, just let it happen naturally. We need to respect private property rights, and we need to stop with this wartime policy. This is not anti-Jew. It's not even anti-Israel. It is anti-war, and it is if it's anti-Israel, it's anti-Hamas too. It is anti-tyrant, and it needs to end.
Yeah, I think people, it's so funny because so many anarchists get upset at me for criticizing Israel. And I'm like, do you think I hate you? I hate the American government, and you're an American. I don't hate you. We're not the government,
On the campaign trail, I got a lot of, because it started with one interview with the Jerusalem Times, and then it turned into like 1,000 Jewish organizations interviewing me, and it was all the same questions over and over again. But one of them was, why don't you support the Israeli state, the Jewish state? And I said, I don't support any state. And they said, well, but you're a Jew. And I'm like, yeah, I'm also an American. I don't support that state either, guys. Like, I mean, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. And keep in mind, when I was running for vice president, I was not shy about the fact that I was an anarcho-capitalist. I did not hide that. I didn't run out on the stage and go, hey, everyone, I'm Spike. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. But I never shied away from that fact. And I would say, I don't support any state. I don't support the United States state. I support a peaceful dissolution of presumed authority in favor of respecting the people's lives, rights, and private property. The Jewish state doesn't fit within that. Neither does the Hamas state. None of this fits within that.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time here. I got one super chat. They got a question for you. We'll just see what it says. Do you think the government is slowly walking us into a war with China?
No, I think
guys,
that,
you're giving an easy.
I think that the U.S. and Chinese governments have realized that they can be each other's useful foils, sort of lesser evils, to push for bad domestic policy in both countries. I don't. First of all, do I think that the U.S. government, are there neocons who want war with China? Yeah, because there are chicken hawks who don't realize we can't bomb the entire world, and China would not go well. It would not go well for China. It would not go well for us. You think invading Iran would go poorly? try invading China, the second largest nuclear power on Earth. So I think it's always going to be this dance of, accusing China of being belligerent for putting more of their fleets in the South China Sea, which is their sea. It's literally named after them. And accusing them of being belligerent for, getting upset about Taiwan and things like that. I do think the Chinese government is tyrannical. You can see how they're, pressuring U.S.-based entertainment companies to not say anything bad about China in their movies or shows anywhere, not just in China. So, I mean, everyone's flexing their muscles here. This is what happens. This is, when we say, when people go, oh, we need government or else we'd be ruled over by warlords. This is ruled over by warlords. You have a bunch of competing major centralized mega gangs of warlords that are imposing themselves on each other. I don't think the U.S. government wants war with the Chinese government. I don't think the Chinese government wants war with the U.S. government. I think they're going to constantly jockey for position, but it's a mutually assured destruction if there ever was such a thing. And it's also thanks to trade. They both, it would not just be a destruction from actual life destruction or existential destruction. It would also be destruction of the economy, because our economies are so heavily intertwined with one another that, basically assures there's never going to be a real war. There could be some sort of a new unspoken Cold War that's probably already happening in the Middle East. We're certainly seeing that between the competing narco-terror governments in Central and South America, the Chinese-backed ones and the Russian-backed ones and the U.S.-backed one. Actual direct war with China, no, it would be stupid.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on again, Spike. And you guys heard him. He endorses liberty, unity, and I agree. Yes. He's always talked like that. That's nothing new for anyone who's
nothing new.
To him. And he also says, I'm not a Jew hater, so I appreciate both of those guys.
Not Reed Coverdale, officially good goy.
There we go. But I'll just give you the last word if there's anything you want to plug or any final thoughts or anything you want to say, and then we'll end the show.
Sure. So if you want to follow me, my shows are on Muddied Waters Media. You can find that on all social media platforms, on all podcasting platforms, anywhere that you can watch or listen to stuff on the internet. You can find Muddied Waters Media, or you can go to our website, muddiedwatersmedia.com. If you want to follow just me, I am on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. I'm on Clubhouse now. You can follow me there. And by the way, to answer your previous question, we had a really cool conversation, me and Dave and Justin and the people that tuned in. That was fun. So you can follow me on all of those. Later this summer, everything is going to change. We have some very exciting news on how we are going to work to set America free. And if you want to be among the first to find out what that big news is later this summer, go to spikecohen.com/first. You can sign up now to be among the first to find out what that news is. And I can't wait to get started. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, and I say this a lot, but I'll say it to your audience as well. There may be times as a libertarian, you're looking at these chat rooms, you're looking at, the Facebook groups you're in, you're looking at, the Twitter followings of libertarians, you're looking at maybe in-person stuff you do, conventions, and the numbers seem much smaller than they should be. They seem much smaller than they need to be in a country of hundreds of millions of people, where we are vastly outgunned and outnumbered and outfunded by the enemy that wants to keep us subjugated and continue to rob us blind. And the one thing I will tell you is that every single major movement in human history that resulted in people being more free and living better lives as a result, the Magna Carta, the abolition of slavery, the American Revolution, any of these other things, the peasant revolts that have happened in Europe and across Asia over the years, all of these things started with small groups of people, sometimes just a handful of people in a room, who simply didn't care what the odds were. They were not going to stop fighting. They didn't care how overwhelming the odds were. They didn't care how hopeless it looked. They didn't care the danger that they were in, because they knew that the only alternative to fighting until they won was to just shrug their shoulders and say, I guess that's how it's going to be. And that wasn't acceptable. That's not acceptable to you. That is why we will continue to fight. We will continue to change this culture. We will continue to get people into office. We will continue to dismantle this system. We will win. Liberty will win, because you are the power and we are working together to do all of this. And when we win, when we have ended wars, when we have taken people out of cages, when we have accomplished our goals of setting America free, it will be you that people remember as the trailblazers, the remnant who refused to stop fighting until we finally won. So let's keep at it. Let's keep fighting. And we're just getting started. And Reed, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm super glad to have you in this party, and I'm glad you stuck around. We'll get you back on the show soon. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for watching, everyone. I will be streaming tomorrow night, I think at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're just over here visiting from Spike tweeting this out, please subscribe to the channel. I'm almost to 5,000 subs. That'd be great.
And hit the bell. Hit the bell. Hit the bell.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks,
I want
Spike.
your phone to blow up with notifications every time the show is on. Thank you, Reed.